For every engine that gives up. For every engine that doesn't listen to reason. For every engine that doesn't make it over the hill. There will always be one engine that prevails. An engine with an iron will and an intense desire to be as useful as can be. And that engine's name is...
Whew.
Edward was tired from pulling Henry's goods train and was looking forward to a much-needed rest for a later journey. Thomas puffed into the yard.
Hello, Edward!
Oh, Edward, you should have seen what happened back there. Henry stopped in a tunnel, and Sir Topham Hatt was all like...
Oh, what's the matter, Edward?
Edward was feeling exhausted, but didn't want Thomas to worry.
Never mind, Thomas. Just a bit tired is all.
Well, you have a train due soon. I'm not doing anything. I could take your train for you, and you can have a rest.
No, I can manage the train, Thomas.
Edward, I insist. Besides, you've got nothing to prove. I know if you wanted to, you could take this train across the island with bed buffers and a busted boiler.
All right then, Thomas. Be safe.
Don't worry about me, Edward. Take your rest. A mighty engine like you deserves it.
I'd like to go on the record in saying that the build log portion of this video is going to be effectively the same as Henry's. It is a very similar process. They're made of the same parts, you know, the acrylic, the ABS, the 3D prints, and they both are Rock and Markland chassis. But nonetheless, I am still willing to explain to you all today exactly what I did. The story starts in September of 2022. BR55 wheels were pretty much gifted to me, and the only issue was printing an engine around it. I never really found myself fond of 3D printing an entire tender engine, regardless of the size. And as we all know, Edward is the smallest tender engine of the main fleet. Nonetheless, I had the wheels needed to make an Edward, so all I needed now was the body and the chassis. Like I established before in my Henry video, my printer is, it's pretty cheeks. And I didn't really feel like paying a ridiculous price from a laser cutting company to laser cut these parts, much less I didn't even know where to get files to do that. You know what? I had to delay the project until I was ready to make an Edward. Not to mention, at the time I received this back in 2022, there were already countless people making so many different models of Edward, and I don't know, I just didn't really feel like being a part of that train and having my Edward fall to the wayside because so many people were making better models than what I could have produced at the time.
No, not you, Seamus.
Ah, pooh.
But anyway, the idea remained the same, regardless if I couldn't act on it. But I was going to build an Edward. Hell, he's a pretty small tender engine, and he's a pretty decent size, even though he's got a dump truck in the back, you know what I'm saying? It would be a few years before I was able to actually put these plans into action. Edward was now on the back burner. He was no longer on the forefront of my mind, and so that meant that I could let the talented 3D CAD software people in the fandom finally cook up something that resembled something a lot closer to the model that exists on hand. While I did now have time to work on other projects, I also was still continuously thinking about Edward. I wanted my Edward to be somewhat unique. I keep seeing these classic series models, and of course I would have made a Hit Arrow one myself, but something just about a regular plastic Edward didn't sit right with me. And do not even dare ask me why I didn't make the brass model of Edward. Edward's brass model is just so proportionally butt cheeks that it's just almost insulting to insinuate that I would even consider making him. Look at him! Look at his funnel! It looked like I made that out of styrene and cardboard! Look at his cab! Why is it so flat? Look at the... What is that? Ew! I just want to make it clear, Edward's brass model was never on the table. Just looking at him, it pisses me off. I don't want to ever even think about that model whatsoever. Actually, I don't want to see a singular comment asking me why I didn't make Edward's brass model if I'm so dedicated to the hit era season 11 look, current day model, current day model. Wait a minute. I've got an idea! The current day model of Edward is just like the current day model of Henry. But the current day model of Edward also has a brass tender. This way, Edward can be both brass and plastic. It's like the best of both worlds. J-Most was able to get Tape Merch to measure up the brass tender of Edward and turn that into a CAD, which then she was able to then pass down onto me for laser cutting. Of course, because I am obscenely broke all the time, I only got the sides of Edward's tender laser cut. I figured that since I dabbled in brass before, I could just hand cut the rest of the other parts that I didn't get laser cut, you know? They were all just geometrical shapes, of course. They're a series of rectangles and squares and nothing specific. I got this. Noah, I'm asking you again here. I'm gonna need some acrylic parts for Edward. What do you think? Can you supply?
I think the fuck not.
Once the acrylic parts arrived, it was then time to get to work. Once everything was laid out, I had to make sure to sand everything, just like Henry, so that the glue and then the eventual paint and primer and all that can adhere to these plastic parts perfectly. After assembling most of the body, getting the general shape of Edward down, it was then time to salvage the buffer beam from an existing BR-78 front. And might I add, this was not a clean job. I mean, plastic shrapnel went everywhere. I mean, well, look at the results. This is clean as hell. This was definitely worth it. I would also like to note, while the body was being built, Edward's brass tender was done being constructed because of the wait time between having the brass parts and the acrylic parts. Either or, this part didn't really seem that crazy to log and to note because I'm just cutting out squares and rectangles, and after building multiple brass Thomases, this part came pretty easy. There was very few challenges there, actually. But nonetheless, the resin parts were printed and glued into place, and it was time to fill in the cracks with your friendly neighborhood Bondo body filler. After he was good to go and all the seam lines were filled in and had a nice clean coat of sanding, I gave him the old Henry treatment and gave him quite a few coats of Rust-Oleum filler primer. This, of course, was to emulate the look of paint layers stacking up over the years. As I said before, I'm not gonna sit here and spray paint Edward 75,000 times over just so that it could be authentic. I don't care! After his coat primer was dry, I gave him a nice good old wet sand to make sure he was butter smooth, and he was then ready for his paint.
Edward? Edward?
Huh?
Edward, what are you still doing here? And where is Thomas?
Thomas, he took my train because
No, Edward! You were supposed to take that train to Farquhar. Thomas was to take the heavier goods train. I knew you aren't as strong as you used to be, so I left the harder work for Thomas.
Sir, I am as strong as I ever was.
Edward, that's not what I meant. I know you can.
And I'll show you. I'll take Thomas's good train across the island faster than he can.
Are you sure you want to do this? You can always wait for help from another engine.
I can do this on my own, sir.
Edward puffed into the night. His wheels slipped and his crank pins squeaked, but his tender was full and his boiler was bubbling with determination.
do my best, will do my best. After all this time, after all I've done for this railway, and he thinks so little of me, I'll show you. I'll change your mind.
Steady now, old boy. Don't strain yourself. We're not racing again, are we?
Suddenly, his wheels slipped fiercely, and with a shrieking crack, something broke.
Oh, not again.
I've been through this song and dance before. I gave his coat a nice undercoat of pink primer, and then I sprayed his running board with Coca-Cola Red. Edward's running board is a darker gray than all of the other characters in the later seasons, so I gave him a touch and tone gray. And of course, to top it all off, I then painted his smoke box that black ink black. The blue is the same as Thomas's. I gave him that coat of processed blue C, and he was then given a clear coat. After Edward's lining was applied, I gave him a pretty generous clear coating of semi-gloss. I noticed that the current day condition model is in a matte clear, but for the fact that it's the finish on it is very old, it has this almost semi-gloss look to it, so I felt as if to me a semi-gloss clear coat was the best option to go with here. Edward's handrails were made the exact same way as Henry's, you know, they were resin printed knobs and they had brass actual railings, and those are painted silver and applied to the model. Edward was starting to look mighty delicious, and might I say, I did have some faces made by the Farquhar projects, and I printed those out, painted them, and here they are today. I did end up replacing most of them with the scans that were then released by Covey, but, you know, some faces are I still use some of the faces, come on! But I'd like to note that this is as far as I was able to get with Edward. Edward sat in this cosmetically complete state for several months, and I was unable to do anything because his chassis was made of a 3D printed block. And I'm not using that! Which then in turn meant that Henry was able to surpass him in the model that was able to be completed. He then starred in Henry's video, and in that video, he's not a running model. I'm actually pushing him here. Flash forward from September to March, I had someone that owned a BR-55 chassis block and wasn't going to use it for anything. They then sent it to Noah to have it cut, and Noah sent it back to me, and I was able to slap it onto Edward, and Edward was finally running. I felt as if I was finally hitting the end game with Edward's construction. Edward is now a runner, which meant the only thing left to do was to get his eyes moving and his smoke puffing. At this point, I spent the next couple of weeks absolutely harassing Noah because they have managed to make Edward puff smoke and operate in a way that seemed pretty ideal. So it was all about copying their homework. Of course, the piston pump method was absolutely the way to go with this, and I also did the same thing to Thomas now that I knew how to do it, also thanks to Noah. And after a lot of trial and error, I was able to get Edward to a state which I was able to film with him, and he was a complete model. He had his own eyes, smoke, working chassis, and hell, he was the first Edward that had a brass tender. Replica Edward, I should say. And that's pretty much it. I feel as if the build portion of this video was almost underwhelming in a way that there wasn't really much of a story here. It was just more of understanding where I came from when deciding to take the decisions I wanted to when making this model. This isn't some extravagant, ultra cool, awesome model with the craziest history out there, but I feel like Edward as a character already has enough of that, so having my model almost be the counter to that, almost be simple in design, it's almost poetic in a way. So, with that being said, that's it. Now, let's see exactly how Edward continues this journey.
Well, that's done it. I think we can call it quits here and wait for some help.
No, I can do this on my own.
Are you sure, Edward? This looks really
You don't understand. I have to get this train to Farquhar on time.
All right, then.
Edward's gears grab and his coupling straight.
I think I can, I think I can, I think I can.
The pain was too intense to bear, but he couldn't give up now. Clattering down the line with grit and pure intention, it came as no surprise that Edward was unable to see clearly.
What was that?
Sorry, Thomas. I must have missed a red signal back there. Wait, you left the yard hours ago. Why are you here?
I forgot to take on water earlier. So I've been stuck here waiting for someone to give me a push.
Well, I can try to push you over.
Edward, there's no way you can get me, my train, and yours over the hill. Besides, look at your front.
Not to mention your snap rods. We'll never make it over.
Well, you've said it yourself, Thomas. I can get that train across the island with bent buffers and a busted boiler, and that's exactly what I'll do.
And with the final ounces of courage and steam built up in his pistons, Edward buffered up to the back of Thomas's train. And push and puff and puff and push. The train began to creep, and Edward's wheels squeaked. Thomas was amazed. The driver checked the regulator.
Come on, come on, come on.
You can do it, Edward!
And before they knew it, Edward pushed the cavalcade up and over the hill. But then there was trouble.
Oh no, Edward! I'm so sorry. Edward, Edward?
For an engine that wouldn't give up. For all engines that don't listen to reason. For every engine that doesn't make it over the hill, there was one engine that prevailed. An engine with an iron will and an intense desire to be as useful as can be. But we all know who that engine is, don't we?